Hello everyone, this is King Gratz here. Welcome back to the channel, guys. And today I'm doing something a little bit different. You're gonna see me with the face cam today because honestly I don't know how else I could do this video, but I wanted to do something that's still sports oriented but with almost like a criticism of another channel. So please bear with me here. I hope this video is going to be informative and gives you a little bit more of an understanding behind the background of YouTube, especially in the sports landscape. So today, I wanted to talk about Steve Dangle, who is a professional content creator. He started on YouTube, and his entire channel is basically geared towards the Toronto Maple Leafs in the NHL. He has been at this, I don't know, maybe 15 years now, in which his entire channel is literally just talking about the Leafs. There's a pretty obvious bias towards the organization in his channel for so many years, in which that he does fan reaction videos for every like regular season game and playoff game until the season's over, and then he kind of does videos on like the draft or free agency or the trade deadline, and it's all obviously Leaf oriented. Sometimes he does videos on like neutral events like the Cup final because the Leafs don't get there sometimes. Well, all the time basically. And I just wanted to talk about him because he is a very prominent YouTuber, and arguably he was a pioneer for a lot of sports-based content creators who were, amateurs at the start. So I wanted to kind of discuss basically how his channel has developed over the years, and particularly look at how I think he has created a significant impact on the hockey community from a social standpoint. Basically, I wanted to talk about three things in this video that pertain to Steve and his channel. Number one is his influence and how basically it's both a positive and a negative. I wanted to talk about number two, his personality and essentially what kind of vibe he gives off when you watch his videos and how his channel has been structured over the years. And number three, I wanted to talk about basically how he reflects the average Leafs fan. But before I get into the video, I hope you enjoy this type of stuff. If you like the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content like this one, and let's get into it. Steve Dangle was starting off. He started YouTube, I think it was like in 2007, and he continues working on his YouTube channel ever since, but now he's got like a full-time editor fixing up his videos, and he always gets them out consistently. At the same time, he now has his own podcast network called SDPN, where he works, I think, with Adam Wilde and Jesse Blake. He runs that podcast network full time now. They're now, I think, official like media status, at least in Toronto, so they can now take part in like media scrums in like pre-game or post-game interviews with players and staff. He worked for Sportsnet for a small period of time, I think before the COVID pandemic happened, but then he left that organization in order to really focus on SDPN, and it's worked out for him, at least at this point. I will say that I think his YouTube channel in particular has had a significant influence both positively and negatively when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So for one, I do think that Steve himself has become a very prominent figure in the Leaf fan base, and he has created, in my opinion, an honest perspective on who a lifelong Leafs fan really is. Someone who has gone through a lot of trials and tribulations throughout his life watching the team that he loves since he has been growing up, right? And going from his childhood bedroom in his parents' house to now his basement of his house that he owns along with his wife, and he now has a kid. And this is basically his full-time gig, right? I mean, it's only a matter of time until he probably retires, because I don't know how old he is, but I think he's approaching his 40s. Correct me if I'm wrong. I really do think that he's done a very good job of giving that honest perspective of like the optimism and the pessimism of being a Leafs fan, especially if you're like directly from the Greater Toronto area where he is. One thing I do think his channel has done a very good job at is that it's created sympathy for the Leaf franchise and for the fans in particular. At least in my experience watching his channels and his LFRs in particular, he has gotten a lot of comments of like people who were like, let's say Bruins fans or Habs fans or Red Wings fans or fans from like parts of the United States like California or Texas or Florida. He has basically created this community that's very positive, and I think they're probably obviously not rooting for the Leafs, but I think they're really just rooting for Steve, and they want him to be basically happy with his life as a sports fan, and they want to see the Leafs win a cup just so that way they can see him be happy. But at the same time, which is the negative aspect, is that his entire channel and viewership is really based off of a more toxic fan base. And he's acknowledged this himself, where basically his highest grossing videos are all like of games where the Leafs have had a terrible loss, right? We can go back to all the choke jobs that they had, like in 2013 or 2021. Basically, every game seven since like 2018, basically. And also, you can count like brutal regular season losses, like the Zamboni driver game that happened just before COVID hit. I think that's still the highest grossing video actually on this channel. So these are just examples of that, and I think he acknowledges it. He acknowledged it, especially like when the Leafs were like a laughing stock at points where they flounder across the season, and he knows that. He knows that people are looking for a reaction from him, and this is usually how he can get like the biggest amount of viewership on YouTube. And that's kind of a problem, and he probably painted himself into the corner for that. And as a result, you have a lot of Leaf haters that basically want to see him suffer from the worst losses that the Leafs could ever give. And that's a problem. And I think as a result of this fan base, I don't think he gives an accurate reflection of what it really is to be a Leafs fan sometimes. Where I think that whether it's his personality, that he just maybe plays this mask, and he just plays like this character of someone who like is very emotionally oriented, or is I wouldn't say optimistic, but super pessimistic. I think that he doesn't portray every Leafs fan specifically. It's almost like it's catering towards a specific crowd. Like I will say, like I've supported Toronto for a long time because of where I am, and the fact that they're like really the only team in my area that I can watch consistently from the NHL because of regional blackouts and stuff. And I want to say that I'm more informative. I try to keep a very neutral stance around the league, and I want to like understand different teams, different players, and how like organizations are doing, right? And I know that there are some Leafs fans that are like completely biased towards the organization. They don't care about anybody else. There are others who are very casual or just want to be there for the fun vibes or whatnot, and will just give up on the team when they're like not competitive anymore. So I totally get that, and I just don't think Steve really like fully describes what it means to be a Leafs fan. If I had to kind of summarize it, I would say that Steve Dangle is kind of like this double-edged sword where he's done a great job of promoting hockey culture on YouTube and has created this viable fan base that has had a greater focus on the Leafs. But at the same time, he's painted himself into this corner of having a toxic fan base where they just want to see him laugh and cry for days on end. And basically, this is how he can get the most amount of viewership. In my opinion, do I think Steve is a good YouTuber? Yes and no. Like, his content's obviously, fine. It's not necessarily my cup of tea. Like, I watched him for a little bit during COVID, but then I kind of lost interest pretty quickly. I would just say that he is maybe on one side of Leaf fandom, and that's kind of it. I just don't really see him as someone that you could like fully agree with on his position, especially for a guy who technically can't skate. Like, I played hockey for a very long time, obviously not professionally, but I played it for a long time, and I can skate, and I know my own ins and outs of the sport, right? So I think this is more of like a reflection of what it means to watch someone's content if you really dissect it. And really, I think you should just take things with a grain of salt, right? Especially with Steve, is that he obviously has a clear bias in his videos, and you have to consider that. Really, there is no other way to take in this content but with a grain of salt. So anyway, that's really all I have to say. So thank you guys so much for watching. You don't have to agree with me. This is just my opinion. But, I hope this was informative. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.